Developing a knight towards the center signals an intent to control key squares and maintain flexibility for future plans. Establishing a central foothold immediately opens lines and challenges white's flank development. Challenging black's central grip, white immediately fights for space and opens attacking lines on the queen side. Establishing a solid pawn chain, black prepares to develop pieces naturally and contest the center. Establishing a central pawn duo now stakes a claim to the core, preparing for a robust pawn structure and potential piece development. Developing the knight to its natural square, it prepares for castling and challenges white's central control. Asserting central presence, knight solidifies pawn structure and prepares further development. Solidifying the center's pawn structure, this prepares for further development and potential pawn advances. Solidifying the center and preparing for kingside castling, this move prioritizes safe development over immediate pawn aggression. Solidifying the center's influence, the knight now awaits development on its natural square. Developing the bishop to its most active diagonal, this prepares castling and supports the central pawn structure. Developing the bishop quietly solidifies the pawn chain's protection while preparing for kingside castling. Securing the monarch establishes a critical defensive cornerstone, allowing for unimpeded piece development and future central advances. Solidifying the king's safety achieves immediate board security. Preparing for fianchetto, solidifying queenside presence and preparing the queenside expansion. A bold pin emerges, challenging the knight's dominion and creating an immediate imbalance in the pawn structure. Developing the bishop to this square controls the vital long diagonal and prepares for central pawn expansion. Centralizing the queen offers more support for a potential pawn push and keeps lines open for bishop activity. Challenging black's bishop on b4 forces a decision, potentially gaining space or weakening the queenside pawn structure. Placing the bishop here prepares for a potential queenside expansion and supports central pawns. Preparing to support the central pawn thrust and potentially launch an assault on the queenside. Opening the center with the pawn capture offers immediate liberation for black's pieces. Opening the b-file now offers white crucial counterplay against black's central pawn structure and potential attacking avenues. Challenging white's central pawn structure, black throws a dynamic pawn into the fray, aiming to disrupt white's harmony and potentially open lines for their pieces. Reopening the e-file now re-emphasizes pressure on black's central pawn structure and potential for an d-file invasion. Relocating the rook to the open e-file initiates a strategic battle for central influence. Knights leap into the center, aiming to disrupt black's pawn structure and open lines. Exchanging knights simplifies the position, potentially opening a diagonal for your bishop later. This capture reclaims central space and opens the e-file, preparing pressure on black's kingside. Fleshing out kingside space, this pawn push weakens the dark squares near your monarch. Eyeing the central dark squares and preparing a kingside attack. Disrupting the central pawn chain, this pawn push aims to break open lines and create counterplay against white's extended kingside. Anchoring the bishop to c2 offers defensive support while preparing for potential pawn advances on the kingside. Emboldening the pawn's advance to e4 unlocks lines for your bishops and disrupts white's central control. Challenging the pawn chain, white attempts to disrupt black's central grip and gain space on the queen side. The bishop retreats, reinforcing the pawn chain and preparing for a potential central pawn push. Forces the black king out of its sheltered position, creating immediate attacking opportunities on the weakened kingside. Protecting the king while subtly reinforcing the central pawn chain is a pragmatic approach. Unleashing a pawn thrust to fracture black's center and target the weakened king's escape squares. Black embraces the pawn chain's weakness, aiming to open lines for the rook and potentially reroute the knight. Initiating a decisive pawn storm that will severely compromise black's king safety. Reclaiming the central tension, The knight repositions to exert influence and prepare for potential central pawn breaks. Opening the central file for artillery pieces often presages a decisive assault. Bringing the bishop into play frees the d-pawn and eyes the kingside assault. Shattering the center's stability by opening lines, white aims to exploit black's exposed king and compromised pawn structure. Solidifying the bishop's control over key central squares now seems crucial for black's development. Reactivating the rook, this move aims to exploit the open d-file and pressure black's pawn structure. Reclaiming the open d-file is paramount, allowing the rook to contest white's powerful central presence. Unleashing the queen disrupts the defender's pawn structure and opens a vital diagonal.